You're looking at downtown Los Angeles, where the hands-on protest with Donald Trump. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Oh, you know what?
Hello, hello, hello.
There we are.
Well, I'm tight.
Hello.
I'm there.
Yeah, welcome to Neighborhood News. Saturday Night Live. George Webb, Aaron, and Mark here.
Hey there.
Hey.
It's great seeing Mark. This is somebody saying the Black Rabbit is saying from France that there was a big turnout in San Mateo as well, in the middle of Silicon Valley for the Trump hands off. So
that's San
here
Mateo there in downtown LA, or that's downtown LA, right here. I got.
Yeah.
I think San Mateo somewhere else. Yeah.
San Mateo's in. Well, this is. I mean, I don't know how you guys feel about downtown LA, but if you gave somebody a little bit of a fix for their afternoon and gave them a sign, you probably could get a whole bunch of people to carry a sign.
Yeah.
Let's see. DC had a big one today. They were apparently all over the nation with these hands-off rallies, and I don't know. I guess I don't think that has anything to do with the markets per se. So it's almost like the markets, the tanking of the markets has sort of eclipsed this in a sense, maybe. But yeah, what are you thinking about the last few days since we talked, George? I mean,
well, the markets thing certainly is the huge story. I mean, it's sort of like an economic 911. With people, 33% of the market at 33% of your portfolio, that, 87, I remember that in 87 was about 33%. And I think that's where they go, you know what, if we go any more than this, if we do a scrape any more than this, we're going to have a riot. So I think 33 is kind of like, okay, that's enough. But that certainly is a hell of a, I saw one statistic that said $11 trillion less in market cap since Trump took office.
I'm looking at it as more of a situation of whenever you have instability in the world, especially like what was going on in Ukraine, the European wealth, especially a threat of the European wealth, comes to the United States. And I'm thinking that because of Trump putting these tariffs on, the Europe's just started pulling their money out, kind of because it's like the precious metals shouldn't have moved kind of counter to the market, and everything went down. So,
Precious metals went down too?
Oh yeah, silver went down under 30 It was like 29.97, and gold, they knocked it back down to like about 3,000. It didn't go down as much as the market. And the 1-day drop was really only about 5%. Whereas, that 87, that was a 25% in one day. This is going to probably bottom out on Monday. We'll have another down day Monday. And then I think we'll have hit the floor, and then we'll see what, that'll be kind of maybe the new range. That's my guess. But my thought is more like this was just money being removed from the economy in protest of our actions really against the Europeans. The Chinese 34% tariff, the 34% of nothing is nothing. We don't sell anything to China, so they can put all the tariffs they want on it. I mean, we sell them straw and ballast in the ships. We send empty boats back, but it's like nothing. 34% of nothing is nothing. So put all the tariffs you want on us, anyhow.
Yeah, that's a good point. The European tariffs are all 25, or are they more than that?
It depends on the countries. But it's not tariffs. It's, because they're going after these value-added taxes and things like that. Well, a tariff is only this, but then you end up adding another 20% thrown onto the car or something once you, bring it into the country. It's a pissing contest. Like I said, I think it'll bottom out on Monday, and then, the market's going to correct itself.
Well, Aaron has a graphic up. Aaron, why don't you read the
reciprocal, right? Trump made sure we all knew the meaning of reciprocal. He said it over and over, right? And they made sure to put that on on their official graphics, right? Reciprocal tariffs right there, and just looks like a list, laundry list of percentages being levied on different countries. And I don't know. I still think it's just school play. Everything I see, George, from now on, for years, I think it's school play. I think this was all part of the plan, and it continues to be part of the plan. And if you pump and dump, the SEC will come after you, or whoever else, right? But what the real the big dogs do is they dump and pump. And over the years, you look at the cycles, and we have the dumps and pumps, and I think they knew that this was their time to let it down and then buy in, and it'll come back up stronger than it ever did before, like it always does. And
yeah, but you get to a point where you're trading the dead horse for a dead cow, and that's pretty much where the stock market is now. The valuation is like, well, this is the money, but if you liquidated the company, what would it be worth?
Well,
Well, look at the fact that there's no European. I see the United Kingdom at 10%. I'm trying to see. I see Switzerland at 61%. So the reciprocal.
The whole European Union's here under China in one line.
Oh, I see. 39 and 20. Is that what?
U.S. discounted reciprocal tariff 20%, and including currency manipulation and trade barriers, tariffs charged to USA 39%. They're saying on the European Union. A lot of people are, questioning the math and everything else, and I don't know, man. I mean, I don't know that we need to dive in on that level. Unless you want to, we can certainly get to the algebra.
No,
the algebraic equations behind where Lutnick and Besant came up with all this. But I think the more prudent use of our time is to talk about Lutnick and the fact that come on, man. I mean, it's just like 2008. Feinberg, they did it in 2008 here in Detroit with the auto bailout and everything else. Like, couldn't see that one coming. And they did it at the end of Bush's term and the beginning of Obama's term. They always use the quick end of the term, the beginning of the term, turnaround to do whatever move they're going to make. And here we are. I mean, same players, not even people.
Just for background, I mean, we've been talking about Steve Feinberg doing the Cerebus Capital and doing the, taking most of the intellectual property out when the auto companies got their bailouts, and then getting that technology to Eastern Europe and meeting with all the car CEOs with Deripaska. If you remember, Deripaska was the runner. And
That was
DynCorp,
at Toyota Tolyatti on the Volga River there in Tolyatti. Is that where that all went down?
Volga Bus, or yeah, remember, and Tolyatti was the place where all the there was that car sedan company that he took it to, and the battery technology went to Volga Bus. And remember, it was the Rothschild agent was Deripaska taking all the technology, but then they also used the Chrysler bailout to make a huge windfall, because they said, okay, we're going to just let Chrysler plummet. And then all of a sudden Feinberg bought in, the word went out that they were going to bail out Chrysler, and the stock went up to 80. And we have somebody, it was one of our researchers in Washington who was a part of that, and his brother, got in on that and then retired, on that Chrysler bailout information. I won't say who it is, but Feinberg made tons of money on that, if you remember. And, he's a part of DynCorp. DynCorp is the people that partnered with Porton Down on the bioweapons for Dynport and the Dynport anthrax vaccine. So we've been talking about him for 9 years for currency manipulations. And then we've been talking about Lutnick with, Cantor Fitzgerald and the plane hitting his firm and him not being there that day and him getting 3 times remuneration, and P-Tech going through the whole building, getting all the high net worth clients for a month before the thing happened. And it's pre-wired for explosives, and it just looks like an economic 9/11 to me.
George, I was looking at this with 92 Cerebrus Capital Management, and I was talking to Aaron about yesterday. We got into talking about the savings and loans and the Resolution Trust Corporation, and this like Cerebrus, okay, they come into the ashes of this whatever it was and start buying up assets, just like KKR and all of them. And it's like, I think that's now we're going to do the banks the way we did the savings and loans back in the 80s, and we've got, they're big fat hogs waiting to be slaughtered. But I'm just like Cerebrus. So this is going to be a redo of, Stedman and the Resolution Trust Corporation and disposing of all these assets from all these failed thrifts, because it devastated Texas. All the banks went down, because oil went from 40 to 8, and all those loans went underwater, it's just the bank, the loans were being serviced. They were underwater because of the things that happened. So,
do you think BlackRock and Larry Fink and the gang are going to just pick up stuff for pennies on the dollar? Kolomoisky will come in with some of that Ukraine money, pick up a few bargains.
Well, they don't have a Hank Greenberg and AIG to pillage to make their loans good, but it's going to be, they're going to need somebody. They're going to have somebody with reserves to help keep them from becoming insolvent.
Is this Hank Greenberg? Maurice Greenberg?
Yep, that's him.
Yeah,
Maurice
that's Hank Greenberg.
I remember you talking about Hank Greenberg, right, George?
Oh, yeah. Greenberg, you can't miss out. Remember, Butina had a relationship with Hank Greenberg too.
Oh, really? No way.
Because it was, they buried Lehman, okay, but Chase and what was the other one that was, big in the mortgage-backed securities? They got paid $1 for $1 because they went in and took this AIG and took the bill, and made their loans good, and then they sunk Lehman and used that as a garbage can to blame the entire financial crisis on Lehman Brothers.
You're saying okay, you go.
If you Google Butina and Hank Greenberg, you'll find out that she was the dominatrix for Hank Greenberg, and there's dominatrix pictures. Not anything that we can't show. It's PG, but if you Google it, you'll see. But Mark's also talking. They let Washington Washington Mutual Savings and Loan go down as the bad actor. They all were lending money to people who had no credit, right?
Right.
But Washington Mutual was the scapegoat, and then Lehman Brothers was the scapegoat on the mortgage banking or the investment banking side, and all the other ones got bailed out. They just took all the money and just said, okay, you have a fifth of the bad assets or a sixth of the bad assets. Same thing for the banks. And then they, in the same breath, they pushed that money from the Fed for the exact equal offsetting balance transaction, if you remember. So Mark's got a good point here. I hope it doesn't get to the point where we have a bank run or a savings and loan run.
Fire sale.
But possible.
Remember General Motors went bankrupt, okay? And what killed General Motors? The reality of it was Ditech. Remember those Ditech mortgages? They got into subprime. GMAC wasn't selling cars, so we'll go in the mortgage business. How'd that work out for them?
Yeah, I remember also when they didn't protect any of the preferred shareholders. You remember that?
Yeah.
And so they basically wanted to liquidate, and then when it was reconstituted, all the insiders got preferred shares. And the other thing is they walked away from all their lawsuits. There was just thousands and thousands of lawsuits against GM. And because of the old entity went out of business, the new entity was clean as a whistle. And the same thing with Chrysler. Ford didn't go out of business, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
They hung in there.
They mortgaged everything, including their Ford Blue Oval, for cash. I think they've gotten that all back.
Well,
yeah, and you wonder if this is going to hurt or help Tesla. I thought Tesla was substantially down. There's Butina
doing
the pop-ups on me. Sorry, we gotta.
But
get rid of
Butina
that
definitely had Hank Greenberg as a client, and I think she said something about these mortgage bankers or these people getting these bailouts. You just have to keep them in check. She was going to be the Russian agent to make sure that AIG didn't get too much cash. It'd be interesting to read that article. I haven't read that article in 8 or 9 years, but Butina sure did get around. She was with the black sheriff from Milwaukee. She was with Bobby Jindal. She was with who was the governor from Wisconsin? She was with Patrick Byrne. She was with Paul Erickson, the CIA guy. Let's see, who else was she with?
Stanley Fisher met up with.
Oh yes, Sheets and Fisher. Stanley Fisher from the U.S. Treasury and Sheets from the Fed. She really got around.
Google's making it hard for me to find all these pictures here. I was looking for the PG one you were talking about, but she must. I mean, after them putting her with Hank Greenberg, she must have been ecstatic to be able to go out with Byrne and the sheriff from Milwaukee. There, she was probably happy as could be. I mean, they must have paid her a lot for Hank Greenberg. I mean, that's a tough one.
Well, I think it's one of those things that wasn't exactly, I don't know how to say it politely, third base, but
I see. He couldn't even. Okay, yeah.
Well, I think third base would be a polite way to say it. But man, oh man, was that fun. That was good for neighborhood news. We covered that in its entirety, and it was exciting every moment.
Those were the days, certainly. But
Hank Greenberg, this is almost like Edward VIII and what was that woman's name?
Edward VIII. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I think that was going on there too.
Yeah. What was her name? She was the divorcee. Yeah.
The reason that he gave up the kingship. What's that?
Well,
somebody knows it.
I wonder if, we've given Trump a lot of benefits of the doubt. And to be honest, I'm okay with continuing to give him the benefit of the doubt, because I think he really, like you were saying the other day on your space, he is doing this to try to bring manufacturing back. He really loves manufacturing. He wants manufacturing in the heartland, in the Midwest. He wants Americans, making stuff and having good jobs. And I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a blind spot. I just don't know that he knew. I wonder if Lutnick and Feinberg and their crew used that soft spot in his heart to pull this, because I don't know that anybody.
This is way too much. When you're tuning a radio, you don't flip it like this, right? You tune in. Wallace Simpson is who you're thinking of, Mark. Yeah, Wallace Simpson.
Yeah.
But tune the radio. This is what we said, 10, and then make it 20, and then make it 30, but don't tell everybody it's going to be 25 with Canada and then come out with 67 on China. And I think that 67 number, and it was the first number, all of a sudden everybody just stopped listening to everything else he said and ran to their Robinhood account and said, sell, 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 and it created a panic sell off. And I agree with Mark. I think Monday will probably be the bottom where the emotion of this thing will have subsided. But there's a lot more people on the streets in LA today because of what happened in the market the 2 days before. If my portfolio, if I had any money and my portfolio, let's say I had like $1 million, right? And it went down 30% and I lost 300,000, I'd be out there on the streets with those folks. I would be angry. Why did you do this? Why couldn't you have dialed this thing a little bit easier? Rather than, if Trump wants to bring manufacturing, I'm all for that, back to the United States, but do it like Mark said, do it in a way that is where they expect what's coming, and you telegraph the right moves and you telegraph it to the market so the market doesn't have these emotional days.
Well, I think I can tell you how Trump's dealing with these people. And that's simply this. You're sitting on all this debt, okay? And the only way that you're going to get any kind of recovery on all this debt you're holding is you're going to have to bring a hunk of it back here and invest in the country, okay? Because the only money the only bonds that are going to get paid off are the ones that get repatriated. And, but because they're sitting on the debt. Remember Jim Baker, when he was Treasury Secretary back with Reagan? It's our dollar. It's your problem. Okay.
Wow.
So I think that's where because he's going to go some point. I think there'll be some point where you'll have a certain length of time to turn your Federal Reserve notes in, and then they don't have any value anymore. They'll cancel the currency. I mean, that's the usual thing at some point. And most of the currency is overseas. What are they? Maybe 2% of the U.S. dollars are actually in the United States. And then even like 2% of that is actually in currency and coin.
Well,
so
Mark, you mentioned interesting because they did do that thing with Bitcoin, saying the Bitcoin can be a coin of the realm. It can be an official currency. And I wonder if these guys, Lutnick and Feinberg and so forth, just moved everything into Bitcoin. I don't know what happened to Bitcoin. What happened to the Bitcoin price?
Oh, it's the shining star here in the last few days. That's for sure. Definitely. Bitcoin
Did it go up?
Crypto. It didn't. It's just sideways. Whereas everything went down, Bitcoin hasn't really done anything.
The money that's gone into crypto, in the old days would have gone into gold. Okay, so I'm thinking that they've used the cryptocurrencies like the Bitcoin and the Ethereum and even now at the XRP. Okay, don't buy gold, buy this cryptocurrency, but it's still a fiat product, and you can't really spend it on anything, But what happens when all that money starts people want to take their Bitcoin and buy some gold? What's that going to do to the gold price? It's just a rhetorical question.
You guys are sitting on a whole display case full of gold and silver. You guys better, increase the guard there at the Metroplex Center there in Lambertville.
Well, they all took a hit, but gold actually took less of a hit than silver. Silver's more of an industrial metal, and I think everybody's just sort of freaked out about industry across the board right now, and so a lot of industrial things did take a hit, whereas gold, is maybe less susceptible to industry. But this is, they were talking about the U.S. Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, which has been.
But you have this other thing too, though. Okay, you have this Basel III that's coming on July 1st. Okay, which that's going to turn gold into a tier 1 currency. Okay, where rather than real estate. Okay, and the banks are in a situation right now. Okay, that if the gold and silver price get out of control, they're insolvent. So the plunge, but what do they call it?
The plunge protection team.
Well, it was the
Is that what you're referring
exchange
to?
stabilization fund or whatever, will come in there and keep a lid, because if silver gets out of hand, I mean, that's the end of the banks.
Well, I was joking about the ready supply. You have to go out to the airport in Lambertville, and you have to get through several layers of guards and barbed wire and a big vault. So, but it's out there by the airport. The gold
Oh,
and
that
silver.
place down the road a little bit.
that place
Yeah.
there at Whiteford Center in
Mhm.
Stern.
Yeah, it's one of the top gold and silver trading. So if you're
silver,
if you're gonna be silver docks, yeah. If you're going to be flying in to do gold or silver trading in this down economy, make sure you get over a couple of miles away, one or 2 miles. Get over to see Mark, the Silver Shark, and Aaron, and see the planes, trains, and automobiles studio there.
Before I close this tab, who is this Wallace Simpson? Who is she? A socialite? Another?
She's allegedly the reason that Edward VIII abdicated the throne in 1936. In fact, 1936 was the year that England had 3 kings, and
Wow.
but anyhow, she had been thrice divorced, and I think it was more, in my own mind, there was other reasons that he abdicated, but he was completely helpless without her. I think I wonder if she dressed him and wiped him, and
It's like a Meghan Markle before her time. It sounds like.
Meghan Markle kind of reminds me of Wallace Simpson. It's
Right.
kind of that same kind of a relationship.
She definitely had sort of the dominatrix kind of personality and relationship with Edward, and he was jelly without her. And but he also didn't want to be king either, because you have to go to a lot of ribbon cuttings, and he wanted to fly his plane and drive his sports cars. And outside of the relationship with her, he was a pretty macho guy. He was pretty much a playboy and so forth. But when he got around her, he turned to jelly.
He fought in World War One, okay, and
I think he was highly decorated in World War One. Yeah,
and he came to appreciate the common man, and he was not pretentious like that, and he was like the people's king. His father, okay, they were pushing, when Hitler came to rise, to start a war, and George V did not want a war, and it's alleged that like his doctors and had him killed, okay, and then put Edward on the throne, and I think Edward, he'd been in World War One. He knew his father didn't want a war. If he became king, they weren't going to have a war, so they had to get rid of him. Had to get rid of him. He was kind of like the Trump of the time, So they used
Churchill and that whole Tory, the whole Northern group, they wanted war in the worst way. Yeah. They were just waiting for Hitler to bomb or do something stupid, And they say he celebrated in his garden the day that the first bombing occurred of London, because he knew that was it. It was sort of like trying to get the British into Ukraine, right?
Yeah. And Joe Kennedy was ambassador to Great Britain, okay, who was another pacifist. Passed it on to his sons, okay, and so again, I think that's where you're getting in here. When you get down to it with Bobby, okay, as the neocons know that they aren't going to get a war with Bobby, so Bobby can't be around because it's the neocons. It's been the neocons for 200 years, and all different names, but it's
which one's Joe there? Joe's the
glasses.
That's Joe Kennedy.
Glasses, yeah.
That's JFK's father.
Yes.
Yep.
And RFK Jr.'s grandfather.
And anybody Mark is correct here.
He was a bootlegger. He was the bootlegger, and
yeah, he was also, definitely a bootlegger.
And he brought
he also owned RKO Studios when Marilyn Monroe was there.
Oh,
and Howard Hughes bought it later, but the Bob Mayhew supposedly used the young Marilyn Monroe because her parents were in the film department there. That was the first use of Marilyn Monroe as a lure for the Kennedys. And the first Kennedy was actually Joe, as far as Marilyn Monroe, and then the two brothers as well. And that's an interesting relationship. That's right up there with Butina, having all three Kennedys.
So she went after the father before the sons.
Her parents worked at RKO, and
so she's an Oconus lure.
She was an Oconus lure for sure. Her first job was at Radio Plane, which was the first drone, right? And but then Ronald Reagan picked her up. They did a talent hunt of all the women that were all the Rosie the Riveters, and that's how they got her initially signed. I think Daryl Zanuck is the one who signed her originally. I can't remember who originally signed her, but I thought her for there. She has a Radio Plane, but then she got John Huston, who was involved with Steve Hodel and that whole blackmail ring at the Hodel house in sort of West Los Angeles, in that Beverly Hills, West Los Angeles area. He got her into Blackboard Jungle. That was her first kind of more than bit part. That was her first speaking part. But she was right into the compromise from the very first days.
She looks so wholesome there.
She had a top secret clearance at Lookout Mountain. Why does she need a top secret clearance again? Yeah,
it was Marilyn DiMaggio.
Well, that segues. Oh, she was
Marilyn DiMaggio. She was married to Joe DiMaggio, about a year, and then Arthur Miller. Yeah, for about.
But that was the name on her. I saw her military credentials that she used there, and Marilyn DiMaggio.
When she got the clearance was when she was married to him. You're saying,
or she kept his name legally. I don't know.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, she could have kept his name.
And he was the one who really fell in love with her. Arthur Miller, kind of could take, I don't know, he was more into like reading the newspaper and smoking his pipe. He really wasn't that, enthralled with her. But Joe DiMaggio was head over heels in love with Marilyn Monroe. He was there at her. Yeah.
It was a hell of a schnoz on old DiMaggio there. Who knew, huh?
Like you said,
word, yes.
Like you said with George Steinbrenner, he goes in the 90s. He said, George, what you're paying baseball players right now, and what I hit, and with my stats, we'd be sitting down and talking to each other like partners. We'd be figuring out how much of the Yankees you own and how much I own. But yeah, he was certainly in love with her, and I think she just kind of really threw him in the trash can when the other opportunity came up. I think it was, I can't remember who she married. I think it was she had an affair with Jack Kennedy in as early as 52.
Oh, that birthday party, remember? Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
Oh, that was 62. Yeah, but he used to come out to Santa Monica in 52, and she liked Jack Kennedy. And so that one. And her father is the one who told Jack Kennedy about her, right? So her father had carnal knowledge before that, but that the Santa Monica beach house was their favorite love shack, I guess.
Fascinating stuff. Well, that's a good segue. We're already about a half hour in, a little more than a half hour in, and we were only going to cover a couple topics just briefly here this evening. And if we could move, I mean, we can talk about the comments or the markets maybe when we do comments again, but I wanted to get your take on, I don't know if I'd call it a scandal, but like kind of just everybody talking about RFK and him being blackmailed or not blackmailed, or, the Mossad, having something on RFK is being alleged, I guess, out there. There's just all sorts of weird, wild allegations. And it's pretty hot in the news right now. I know the Dow going down and everyone's portfolios being crushed is the bigger story, but I was interested to get your take on RFK. Candace Owens and Ian Carroll had a pretty viral show yesterday or 2 days ago where they made some allegations about, how they think, they were like, there's no way RFK would hang out with this Rabbi Shmuley figure unless he was blackmailed by Israel, yada, yada. And then, I saw Dark Journalist come out, kind of pretty hard against them, saying, hey, those are some BS allegations unless you're really going to substantiate. He was upset about them saying that about RFK, but it's going back and forth all across the internet. And if you've got any, opinion,
Well,
yeah,
I've only met Ian.
If you want, yeah.
Yeah, I've only met him once. We talked a long time, and we both were familiar with each other. So, it's kind of like when you see somebody, you kind of know them already because you've watched them.
Yeah.
I was surprised he knew all my stuff, so I was really honored by that. But I don't. Ian has, and I send it, and we send stuff back and forth to each other. Just as far as the like the pictures of Suchir biology and stuff like that. And I just wanted to substantiate some of the things he was saying about Suchir biology and the AI whistleblower murders. But he isn't the type of person to just make a loose accusation. He's got somebody, at least my impression is he's got somebody, one or two people in Santa Monica that know more, and they haven't spilled the beans yet. There's more to the story. And I think Candace Owens being attacked is also more metadata. That why would you take out Candace Owens right now if it wasn't something that like Rabbi Shmuley was, wanting to lower the level of criticism on Israel. So I do think there's something there, and I think he's waiting for his contact
Democrat voter base. Is that what Kennedy's, just trying to politic, to the Jewish community, which is, has always been historically Democrat, and he's putting up with a lot of, resistance, but there's other Democrats that don't like him and don't want him in power. So,
yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, Cheryl Hines, his wife, who was on, Larry David's show. What was that show called?
Curb Your Enthusiasm? Oh, yeah. Look at that. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So much. She's the wife of Larry David on the show.
Right. She's the wife of Bobby Kennedy in reality and real. and they live in a $25 million Malibu mansion. And I'm speaking at their Children's Health Defense, their chapter on the 6th, the first Tuesday of May. We're going to have a charrette there from May 1st to the 7th. But this gal, this newsie, who is the interloping woman, who's 40 years younger than Bobby Kennedy, is running around with this very distinctive car, like an old offbeat 50s truck that any paparazzi would be able to pick out. And it says RFK 66666, so she's dropping hints that there's something more than the sexting going back and forth between them. And Cheryl Hines it's kind of like, okay, that's about as far as I'm going to go before I'm out of here. And, you're not coming back. So I do think it would affect his marriage. I do think if there was some kind of relationship, or if it went further, D-pics and stuff like that, it might it might trigger a divorce.
Getting Kimberly Guilfoyle vibes just looking at her. I haven't really dumped into the story or known anything about it, but she seems like an operative. The one on the left there, she seems like she's just
she started with Anthony Weiner. She started with the DNC, so it was another Kimberly Guilfoyle story, where they start on the left and then they get, they go to their MK Ultra school or whatever school they go to, and then they get inserted into the, into the right. She definitely is an operator. Peter said he knew her, and she's Sharon Stone type of personality, Barracuda type personality. So we'll see what happens. I think Bobby Kennedy loves Cheryl Hines and he values this relationship. And I do think that is probably blackmail material.
Peter's creation of the phrase décolletage. I believe he said décolletage journalism. The décolletage being the space between the bottom of the chin and the top of the nipple.
Yes.
You know, I laughed out loud when I was watching your guys' show the other day. That was excellent term. So like Peter to make such a creative term.
I think she might be playing her hand a little bit more than what, you know, the card she's holding. And I think Bobby Kennedy, Cheryl Hines is out in Washington living with Bobby Kennedy now. So maybe the story's going away, but Ian really pushed it. Ian said that the pics were coming out and, you know, the whole story was going to spill. And then the attack on the gal
Candace.
that Candace, the attack on Candace doesn't make any sense unless they're trying to get Candace, you know, take her off the boards, you know, take her voice off.
That's what was so precipitous of Candace and Ian getting together. Was
Yes.
that Ian was making these comments and Candace was getting attacked by these people online, and so the two of them are kind of connecting now to circle the wagons a little bit. I see, or so they think.
They're joining forces. I think they're joining forces to show that this isn't going to be one of those games of telephone where, you know, you're going to play two ends against the middle and try to make more of it than it is. I think I'm very happy to see Ian going on a show because it shows that there's not a lot of space between them, and they're, you know, united in saying, you know, Uzi is a floozy or Newsy is a floozy. And it'll hopefully die. Bobby needs to get back to what he got sent to Washington to do. This is my same thing I did a show on earlier this morning with Trump. Trump has to get back to draining the swamp, right? Rather than tanking the markets. And the same thing with Bobby Kennedy. What happened to the 70 or 80 or 90 vaccines the kids take before they're 3? Whatever happened to working on that? Beef tallow and French fries at Steak and Shake is not what you went to Washington for.
It's feeling just like last time, sadly enough. You know, like the first, you know, I mean, remember trust sessions, hashtag trust sessions, hashtag trust bar. I guess the trust bar came later, but at first it was like trust sessions, and then
that was the whole cue.
It's just God, you know, and it was so much drama right off the bat, and then, you know, kind of like a whitewashing of personnel and a new incoming of personnel, and in the meantime, it just time was lost and wheels were spun, and I'm fearing that we're kind of doing that again here. But yeah,
well, I do think, you know, Trump does look like he has a soft spot, and for the, you know, the Chabad Lubavitch, you know, his daughter goes to a Chabad Lubavitch church, and Jared's Chabad Lubavitch, and where you get into trouble, I mean, you're the expert, Aaron, but where you get into trouble is when you start thinking your race is superior. Because then you can do anything you want to the inferior race. And that's just because you're Jewish or just because you're American Indian or just because you're whoever doesn't mean you're a superior race, and doesn't mean that you're exempt from the law. So here you go.
Yeah. I mean, everybody acting all surprised about the whole Trump being Israel first thing now, or like saying that, right? You hear that all like everybody's all upset and surprised. That doesn't surprise me or upset me or have it's almost like no comment. Like,
well,
we've known that
close, keep your enemies
yeah,
closer.
I mean, we've known that for a long time, you know, like we've known about, you know, Rudy Giuliani hanging out with the fiddler, you know, remember the Anna Tevka fiddler and Rudy Giuliani and smoking cigars. I mean, that was 2015.
Fruman and Parnas, you know, the bagmen for the Atlantic Council, as far as Chabad is concerned, you know, which
and I mean, look at
how did that work out for Rudy though?
But you know, look at like oh sorry. Well, like Trump's last day in office, Trump won, right? The Trump 45 was, you know, he pardoned a large handful of Chabad Lubavitch individuals, operatives, you know, whatever you want to call them. But I mean, certainly Joe Biden pardoned more people, and there was a lot of suspicious pardons on Joe's last day, but Trump, pardoned, plenty of bad guys on his last day and everything. And it's just, we've known this. Like, we've all known that there's clearly an Israel thing weaving through, this political movement. And I don't know. I don't know that we need to get too involved with it. I try to stay away from it now more than anything. I know I used to get into that area of the research.
I think you just look at it as another constituency within the bigger, they're just, and they're going to have their self-interest and their desires, and
a lot of distractions there, but I don't know. I mean, that's
the
obviously
only reason I mentioned it. The only reason I mentioned it is because it is sort of the shield or the calling card of Ian, and the calling card of the
Right.
other gal,
Candace,
yeah. Candace. That's kind of like, we're not afraid to say the I word, and that's their kind of red badge of courage. They're not afraid to say the I word. And I don't believe in country words. I believe in Lutnick and Feinberg. Though I don't forget the countries. Those are the guys you got to watch. And Trump really needs to distance himself from those two guys. This is sort of like the generals on the first time around.
Mm-hmm.
Right, which none of them you could trust. Remember McMaster and Kelly and all of them, Flynn and the whole crew. He's doing the same thing with his advisors on the economic side. I'm expecting to see Wilbur Ross, come out of a curtain here, pretty quick, and maybe the Rothschild banker that Kolomoisky's sister, they'll come waltzing in stage right here in a minute.
No doubt, someone who worked at Privat Bank, maybe they'll bring in
Leonid
Vindman, right? The third Vindman, the older Vindman brother from Privat Bank, Kolomoisky's bank.
The titanium tycoon.
But we'll have to get into you had always said we should do like a good Mossad, bad Mossad show, and that's almost like a separate appropriate place for these topics, because they're so loaded and there's so much disinformation and crap to weed through, and we want to keep our eyes on the prize, but it's interesting. Let's do comments a little bit. You'll do a few comments.
Sure.
And then
we'll do comments, and somebody give us a score of the Auburn game. Mike, Admiral Mike Rogers has been calling and texting me. He's Warhawk. He's been saying Warhawk, and I'm supposed to send him a score. I'm just kidding. But you remember Admiral Mike Rogers had, what was her name? Sweet Tea. Oh gosh, what was her name? She was at NSA in South Carolina, on the border there. Oh God, I'm trying to remember. But remember, they had 70 different independent individual contractors.
This guy, Mike Rogers.
Yeah, Mike Rogers. He's from Auburn, and
okay,
reality winner.
He should have been our senator.
Right. Remember
reality winner. Of course. How can we?
No, this is a different Mike Rogers. This is the
not the one from the NSA.
Not the Michigan guy, but he was the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Right. This guy was the head of Cyber Command and NSA. But remember, the way they got around spying on Trump was they said everyone was an independent contractor. They were all. Who did Snowden work for again? I can't remember the third party contractor that he worked for, but NSA contractor. But reality winner, there she is. They had 70 different contractors, all with top secret clearances. And of course, there's going to be a few that are going to dive into Trump people and look at Trump people's conversations, right? And she was the one that went to prison for it.
Booz Allen Hamilton. Snowden was with Booz Allen Hamilton.
Booz Allen, that's right. University of Florida won. Gain of Functionville won. So all the guys at Alachua, all the guys at Natural Resilience, National Resilience and Oligo are probably celebrating tonight for all the vaccine guys. The national vaccine guys are celebrating.
Well, here we'll do a few comments, and then we will get to the Duke game at least. I'm sure everybody wants to see the Duke game, right? But make better products supported by free trade and or fair tariffs to bring manufacturing to the center. says
There you
Arthur.
go.
Yeah, but the other thing too is you can't really do that honestly with a fiat currency, because if you can manipulate the value of your money, okay, well that's just as good as a tariff. Oh well, I'll just debase my currency and then I'll trade with you.
During a market crash, savvy investors who buy stocks at lower prices can benefit significantly when the market recovers. AI.
Yeah.
I wish I could say that in French.
Somebody's daughter lives in Yuba County. I can't remember who we were talking about a little earlier. That was from a few minutes ago. So,
That was probably Marilyn Monroe's daughter.
oh, okay, interesting, nice. And Tyrone here. Hey, Tyrone. And Owens is one to talk with her Tate connections. Yeah, we'll probably stay away from the Andrew Tate thing. That's just more. There's just all this crap on the internet, that
She's
we've gotta
talking
weed
to
through.
Andrew Tate.
Oh yeah, Candace Jones loves Andrew Tate for some reason. I don't know.
Candace likes Andrew Tate. Oh my God.
I mean,
Well, this
Just
is an
kind of
interesting
stuff.
connection. The
Uh-huh.
CIA daughter, Amaryllis Fox, and Gavin DeBecker, using a security clearance, missing Anthony Weiner is an alarming miss. Okay. What do you, Gavin DeBecker is not Gavin, the one who gave us the 9/11 thing with Ehud Barak, right? That said Osama bin Laden did it. The guy who owned the BBC, the Gavin that owned the BBC. This is a different guy. Gavin DeBecker is different, right?
I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with Gavin DeBecker.
Well,
Good.
I don't think Bobby Kennedy's son, which I think is named Joe. He named he had so many kids, but he named one of them after his grandfather. I think Joe married Amaryllis Fox, right?
Bobby's one of Bobby's kids. Yeah. I don't know the name of the kid, but I mean, RFK is the stepfather, father-in-law. Excuse me, not stepfather.
Father-in-law.
Father-in-law of Amaryllis Fox. Yeah, former CIA agent Amaryllis.
So I don't get the connection of Gavin DeBecker. So Dave might want to put the connection to Gavin DeBecker.
We'll get down there here. I'll scroll down for the Dallas JFK thing and the USS Liberty nuclear bomb coming back around. Yeah, everybody's talking about it. Yeah.
Throw the New Mecca Fair in there. Throw Zalman Shapiro and Bill Taylor's great research, and throw Angleton in there. That's the one thing that really has come out of these JFK documents is the whole Angleton Israel connection, which is good to see. And the other thing that didn't get any press at all, and Oliver Stone was there, and Jeff Morley was there in the testimony. 198 page, a 200-page document was on Angleton's desk on the 13th of November and the 14th. Now that means that the 201 file that they had on Oswald was 200 pages. And Angleton's secretary was in Oswald's phone book. So there's a whole bunch, and we're still missing 3,000 files. Again, Donald Trump has not delivered fully on the 80,000 files he said he was going to deliver.
Is Oswald's widow still alive?
No,
Marina? Okay. Because she'd be interesting to talk to now.
Norman Mailer wrote a book with her and had almost exclusive access and did something like, ungodly hours of tapes, like 80 hours worth of tapes with her. And I can't remember the title of the book.
No, I think she is still alive.
Marina Oswald still alive?
It's not giving me a date of death here. Let's see. Born 1941. Wife Lee Harvey does not, usually they would
okay. Well, I stand corrected.
She's out there. She's out there somewhere. Maybe she wants to probably stay out of it all at this point. I don't know.
Probably wants to come into the Metroplex and give you guys an interview.
Yeah. We could only be so lucky, right? Here's a MAGA Nancy G in San Francisco said Soros paid protesters to be bussed in from out of town to San Francisco and Oakland. Here, I got that as my first tab up. Let's go back and check on LA. Well, let's see if they've burned down another part of LA here.
Yeah, but see, they're not having Gaza protests today. They're doing this.
It looks like they're getting a little more riled up out there.
Well, it's getting late. Maybe they're still passing things out. I don't know. I just look at them as rent riots.
Yeah, I mean, check the IP addresses of all those folks and the other events they've been to, I guess, right? That's what they say. But
they're planning things. I'm looking at these as just like dress rehearsals for, the craziness that they're going to, proceed with.
Well, the other thing is it's a nice day in Los Angeles and it's a Saturday. Where are you going to go? And if somebody's giving out free Red Bull, that's probably where you're going to go.
Public employees don't work on Saturday.
In my opinion, Bobby looks like a deer in the headlights since going to Washington, says Debbie. A little bit. Oh, I got us too big here. Sorry.
Yeah.
Bobby Newsy story is hyped text. Yeah, I think it's a lot of nothing, right?
Agreed.
Mm-hmm. Jim Jordan and Trey Gowdy, such rodeo clowns. Yeah.
I haven't really heard much of Jim Jordan lately. They've been kind of tipping in the direction of who's the new one, Luna, who's doing all the bikini pics and everything. They're kind of making her the new femme fatale of the Congress.
It is weird that she's the disclosure, gatekeeper. I'm sure she would not appreciate that term gatekeeper, but that's kind of what it's seeming like, right? I mean, like, why are we needing to do it like this? But yeah, she is lovely. There she is, Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna.
What I don't want is they seem to be giving out, like on these last 3,000 files, they're down to the real juice, right? Which is, okay, how did Israel get the highly enriched uranium and now the threats of the suitcase bomb to Kennedy from Ben Gurion? We're down to the real brass tacks now. They're giving out one file and one factoid at a time to her to release in Congress to make a splash. And they're bringing in Oliver Stone and they're bringing in Jeff Morley. And then now that's one thing. And now here's another folder. And I think they're going to be giving these things out now, breadcrumbing these out to her. And I disagree with that. I think they should just put all 3,000 of these last remaining files out there. But it looks like they're going to milk this thing, 1 week at a time. But I would like to see it go a little bit faster. She said she was going to bring forward a witness who's still alive, who has some hot document. It's been 60 years. we could pick up the pace a little bit here and kind of move along.
What they say, to delay is to deny.
Yeah, it's only been 60 years. It's been my whole lifetime. Yeah.
Yeah. There's the NUMEC uranium plant in Apollo, Pennsylvania, was a 2-story, 50,000 square foot industrial facility that stretched for nearly 2 blocks along a main street in town. And this is just, the NUMEC affair did highly enriched uranium from the United States aid Israel's weapons program.
Remember, we had a charrette scheduled there at Shippingport, the first American nuclear reactor on the Ohio River.
And then they shot Trump in the head.
And then they shot Trump, and we were all ready to go talk about the NUMEC.
We can't let George Webb tell the people about Shippingport. We got to get, shoot Trump in the head, or that's maybe a little embellishment. It did happen right then. We were supposed to be in Shippingport when Trump got shot.
We were just heading to Shippingport. Yeah.
But just like this uranium factory here, I think this is more of like, since we went off the gold standard. Okay, so did this aid nuclear weapons in Israel? Okay, did we have to redeem Federal Reserve notes that Israel had? Okay, as payment because the money doesn't have any kind of a backing. So it's like, we'll take weapons, we'll take some other in kind. Okay, so like, okay, well, we need assistance with our nuclear weapons. Okay, well, we'll give you credit for these Federal Reserve notes. Okay, just like China. We have all these dollars from your product. Well, we'll come over and buy this factory. Okay, because we can't get gold for these dollars, so we're going to get something tangible.
Well, in this case, it wasn't a financial transaction, I don't think. I mean, there may have been precious metals behind this, like going the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
But they had Angleton with Guy Burgess.
Uh-huh.
Dave mentions the act of eating a banana. It wasn't the act of eating a banana, but something similar as compromised material on James Angleton. And, you know, that's embarrassing. And Roy Cohn had the same banana eating contest I think they were a part of. And so Angleton is the one who got the NUMEC metal, the uranium metal to Israel, right? And I think that was out of what do you call it? You know, a compromise. It was out of blackmail. You might be right. There was maybe some gold that got transferred here, some currency.
Well, I'm just the fact that we don't have any, real, when we have a fiat currency that has no convertibility, there's no real basis to it anymore, because it's like it all came unglued after like 1971. It's like, and everything that's why we had 1987, because all of the wealth was being moved out of the country.
Well, 71, when we went off the gold standard, I mean, this was NUMEC was 61, right? So maybe this is what I mean. The NUMEC affair. Bill Taylor's right. I think this is going to be the last 3,000 documents, because once Israel got the actual metal, something that they could hit with a cross section, then they really could do a suitcase bomb and really could threaten Kennedy at that point. Once Kennedy knew that they had a fissile bomb that they could put in a suitcase, that had to change Kennedy's attitude, in my opinion. But I mean, there are already memos from Ben-Gurion threatening Kennedy with the suitcase nuke. So, I don't know why they don't just drop the last 3,000, files.
Bill Taylor did an awesome thread recently on this NUMEC affair. That's why I'm looking for it. I don't know if I'll find it on his Twitter. I will try to bring that up here though, because Bill Taylor is certainly someone you got to follow on Twitter. If you don't already here, I don't know that we're going to find his thread on that, because he's
Charles
active on Twitter.
Charles Heald is talking about the Saipov truckers. The Saipov truckers, who kept driving the uranium. They were supposed to drop it off at those Soviet factories, but they just kept driving to Ukraine.
Oh, and then one of their workers, that was the Chelsea truck
Saipov.
rampage. One of the guys who worked for him.
He had 26 different trucking companies, right? He drove the Blackstone Express. He had 26 different trucking companies, but he had to rent a U-Haul white truck for his rundown of the people in Chelsea. You're sitting there with a whole fleet of trucks, but you have to rent the iconic FBI, supremacist truck to run people down. It just didn't make a lot of sense. But anyway, it happened. He wasn't Chechnyan though. He was Azerbaijani. Not Azerbaijani, Uzbeki. He was Uzbeki.
It was Uzbeki, yeah.
They wanted the death penalty for him, and I don't know how that ended up.
Yeah, we'll have to check on that, follow up on that on our next show. Here, I'll go just up here to one comment here. Not Gavin Davies. Gavin DeBecker is world security expert. Okay.
Gavin Davies. That's right. Gavin Davies. I wonder if he had an American daughter. Well, anyway, I wonder if you mentioned to the American daughter of Gavin Davies, the Pfizer org chart, if that would send you into a psychotic break and you'd go to Mexico. I don't know. I won't say the person, so I'll just leave it. I'll just leave that one hanging there.
If we don't get to Bank for International Settlements promoting global monetary and financial stability, cough, cough, it's all for nothing. So,
well, I have to agree with that. Dulles, all the Marshall Fund, the Middle East Marshall Fund, they've been at the center of this whole thing. The center of the cabal uses the banking system there in Basel, right?
And Basel is coming in July 1st.
Yeah,
it's completely changed. Collateral requirements for banks, and
really, I guess
they're getting ready
Bank of International Settlements is going to process the Ukraine construction as well.
And it all, I mean, all goes back to the Jewish Colonial Trust having their
Well,
meetings in Switzerland over 100 years ago.
the Bank of International
really good.
Settlements is the default receiver of all collateral. So when in any of bankruptcy, ultimately it goes back to the BIS. That's the beginning of all money. So it's also the return of all loans.
Right, International Monetary Fund, and you can just print more. So there you go.
No, the king who abdicated, that's his daughter. That must have been from our
Edward had no children.
Okay. RFK's third, his mom grew up on University Street in Bloomington. Interesting. Bloomington, Indiana, very important place. James Jesus Angleton. Hey, Debbie. One of his girlfriends does interviews with the missing link. Oh, they must be talking about Judith Very Baker, I'll bet. When we were talking about
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about Indiana University that Dave mentions is the radiation experiments, because when they didn't, somebody eventually, I can't remember the guy's name, decided, hey, what if we took the radiation that all the developments happening with the guys doing electron beams and all this stuff, and combined it with what they're doing over on the biology side. Thomas Hunt Morgan and he said, well, what should we hit? And somebody came up with flies. Let's, because that was a model organism. And so they changed all these flies. And remember all the horror movies that came out with the fly and all the, but that was Indiana University. And so Indiana University became kind of a genetic center. And a lot of people ran through Indiana, getting ready for, the World War II and the bioweapons. Not far from there, they kept in Terre Haute is where all the anthrax was developed at the various different bioweapons factories there. And the research was being done at Indiana University. So I know Dave's parents go back to Indiana University and his grandparents go back there. So it's a nice little rich little source of metadata.
Here's another one. This Hermann Joseph Muller, who did experiments with fruit flies. He was one of the first, fruit fly experiment guys, and he was a big socialist. And you can connect him. It'd take us quite a while, but we could connect Hermann Joseph Muller all the way to coronavirus. People that he trained and his proteges and things all the way down the line. It's all there, and he was a big socialist scientist. The socialist scientist movement was a big deal. More publicly, I think it still is a big deal. But they used to talk about it more openly, and he was one of them in Indiana. But yeah, all sorts of interesting stuff we can come up with here, thanks to our great contributions from the chat. And we get a few more of them up here. Easy and how you eat your nanner. Yes. We don't need to talk about the bananas anymore. We'll move along. Bill Taylor too. Angleton makes me want to throw up. Yep. George Jr. Scrub is still alive. Picture of Jr. in Dallas.
I think there's a picture of George H.W. Bush in Dallas. Jr. would have been a little young, but okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm rapid firing these here. They're all kind of one thought. Young Plan and Owen Young founded RCA, not David Sarnoff. Mm-hmm. David Sarnoff at CBS, right? That would have been Judith Ferry.
RCA was founded by General Electric and Westinghouse. They consolidated.
Right. They consolidated. Radio Corporation of America. I seem to remember Sarnoff at Wanamaker's typing out for the Titanic who was the survivors and who wasn't. Right. And he was big in with Marconi. Remember how Marconi was the first wireless?
Right.
And they were battling it out. And Westinghouse was doing the tubes for the radio.
But they kind of did the same thing with, like how JVC, licensed out VHS technology to other companies,
OEM.
similar to and that's why VHS survived and Beta died, because Sony wouldn't share the Beta technology with other manufacturers. So they created essentially a radio monopoly. And in fact, the RKO studios of radio, that was the RKO was part of the RCA that was set up, and then that was Radio Pictures, and that was a part of the the
The
RCA.
tower is still there. The tower's
Yeah.
still there in Los Angeles. Yeah, RKO was Radio Corporation of America first, right?
Yeah. And Keith and Orpheum. That was the three BF Keith theaters and the Orpheum Theater. They merged the three together. In fact, I think there was Joe Kennedy that did that.
Yeah. And the Young Plan created the Bank of International Settlements. That was the outcome of the first chairman of the RCA was Owen Young. And I think the Young Plan was a World War I plan, correct? With the Bank of International Settlements. Wasn't the Bank of International Settlements created after World War I?
I'm thinking it was Geneva Convention when the world went bankrupt in 1930.
Okay.
1930. Yep. Bank of International Settlements.
When he still created the Universal Commercial Code and all that fidelity ceremony, whatever.
But it was about World War I, because the Bank of International Settlements, established in 1930, was initially conceived to handle German repatriation payments after World War I and to foster cooperation among central banks.
We're still under this bankruptcy. I don't know. It might have ended because 70 years is how long I guess international debt can go on. So it might have ended, but
no, you're right. The Germans haven't paid off their debt yet from World War I don't think, or they just did. They just did.
Wow.
That, like I said, it was, in 1930, the whole world went bankrupt. Started with the little bank in Austria that set off the stock market crash in October 29, and then it just,
I think,
and then in the 1930s, then we did a wash and rinse, with the group that came in 32 in our country, and
they tried the Dawes Plan. This is right. The League of Nations after World War I tried the Dawes Plan, and the Dawes Plan failed because it did. Allen Dulles and Sullivan Cromwell and Rockefeller didn't endorse the Dawes Plan, right? They endorsed the Bank of International Settlements.
We should have done at the Treaty of Versailles, was devalued gold at that point like 50%. Because that was the problem. They tried to go back onto the gold standard with the same gold price with all of this debt that had been built up by the war, rather than reset the gold price to reflect all of this money that was in circulation. Had they done, the $35 or whatever in 1919, we probably wouldn't have had a depression. We wouldn't have had Smoot-Hawley. Okay. The Europeans would have had to give us more to get their gold back.
Smoot-Hawley.
We gave a lot of our gold to Britain, right, to finance the war, because they ran out of credit about halfway through the war. That's what created the Federal Reserve, right?
Yeah.
Well, we've gone full circle. We started talking about the tariffs, and here we are talking about the Smoot-Hawley tariffs. Who could have guessed we would take it from back 100 years to Smoot-Hawley? But
we were on the
I'm
gold
sure.
standard in 19.
Did you see what Rand Paul said? He said every president that's tried tariffs has made sure their party wasn't reelected for 20 years.
Jeez.
Something like 50 years for McKinley, and then I can't remember who else tried it. But who would have been president? Harding, right around 1930, or maybe Hoover.
It was
Hoover. Yeah.
Things were cool with Coolidge, and Hoover was really a globalist. I don't think he would what you would call a Taft Republican, but
what I thought a way of saving face for Trump would be, look, if you fly here and you get off of we'll fly you over with Marine One, and if you come out with a hat, wear a hat like Mark has, and then as soon as you come down the stairs of Marine One, then put your hat in your hand come hat in hand to the White House.
Mhm.
As long as we have the optics of you coming hat in hand in the White House, then we'll make the tariffs go away. But Trump needs to have a way of saving face here. He can't just roll back the tariffs without getting something. Otherwise, he's going to look bad.
Yep. Well,
Again, we were a creditor nation when we had Smoot-Hawley. We're a debtor nation now. Okay. And again, okay, if you want to get your money, you're going to play ball with me, or Trump knows how to make assets out of bankruptcy. It's like he's
That's true.
That's
true.
That's what he's going to do. He's going to make assets out of bankruptcy, and these Europeans know. It's like, how many cents on the dollar do you want to get?
See those casinos? I can empty them all out right now. See all those Atlantic City casinos? They could be paying you nothing. Those ants don't pay rent. I can just see them now.
Ask Merv Griffin.
Yeah, resorts world. Yes.
I guess when you think of it that way, that's almost scary, right? He's like, you guys think I haven't done this before. This is how Trump plays ball.
That's why I figured he would be the best man for the job, because he knows how to, make assets out of bankruptcy. and that's what you do.
Well, and you remember what no one would touch the debt, remember? And then Wilbur Ross said, well, I've got all this dark money from the old Soviet Union. And well, what do you think? It's all mafia money. And they said, sure. And that's what really saved Trump, right? Was all the Wilbur Ross dark money for those casinos.
And he's paying him back. So it's a good president.
Well, I think we should leave it right there. What do you think? Thanks everyone for being here, George. Or any final comments? That was good. Hoover was with the Swiss. Hooverville was the ghetto. Just get these last few comments in. 10% federal budget went for ransom to Barbary pirates, extortion 1780. That's right. Yeah. So we'll see you Wednesday, George. Try to do these Wednesday mornings and Saturday nights for now, as we get neighborhood news back on the road and get you. I'm sure I guess you'll be back on the road in about a month. You'll be going down to Santa Monica.
Santa Monica.
So for folks who are in the area, can check out the charrette down there in Santa Monica coming up in May. Tariffs sound like trafficking, and Melania just gave a speech on that topic. I think they are still cleaning up all that. It's a big problem. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Here, I'll take this old picture of Trump and Wilbur Ross off the screen. The whole world he is fixing, not just the United States. Well, we'll leave it right there. Georgia, how can folks support you?
Real George Webb 1 on Real George Webb 1 on Twitter, and georgewebb.substack.com and gwebb.substack.com if you want the Gary Webb stuff and all the Danny Casolaro stuff. All the old juice is the GWeb. So those are the two places. $8 a month is a paid supporter, so I need some more paid supporters. That'd be great. But if not, most of the articles, I think all of the articles are free now. So, with just some rare exceptions on the series may be paid because they cost a lot of money to create.
Absolutely. But if folks can help George at Substack or buy me a coffee, I guess the Substack's really the place. Buy me a coffee. Still got the buy me a coffee going, right? Here's buy me a coffee.
Yeah. No, I'm right there. I'm in front of the Bank of International Settlements right there, and
look at that.
375 billion went out for Ukraine reconstruction in 2022 to keep all the European countries in the war. So whoever heard of giving out half of the reconstruction money before the war ends? That's the Bank of International Settlements.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we will see you all Wednesday, maybe even before. And thanks for being with us, George. And
great to be here.
Check out that Duke game. I think we don't want Duke to win tonight. So Florida, and then we'll check out who the next winner is. But right, nobody's rooting for Duke, right? Maybe you are rooting for Duke.
Gain of Functionville. Gain of
Yeah,
function, though. You got one gain of function university with Ira Longini and all of them, right? Bob Malone, versus another one, Duke, where, well, Chapel Hill isn't exactly University of North Carolina. They're about 40 miles away from each other. So I'll give Duke a break here. Ralph Barrick won't get, it's 40 miles away at UNC. So yeah, we'll just say probably Duke should win.
Well, and remember, early coronavirus, remember all those numbers were all fudged by the Singapore statistics. Remember Singapore statistics, which was a Duke, is actually like a Duke partnership. You got that Duke University US thing with Singapore statistics. They were the one who gave out, like, they were the ones who got everybody all nervous about what's going on in China, right? There was the Singapore.
Wasn't there an MQ-9 Reaper that left Korea with 300,000 test kits to Johns Hopkins for the early heat maps that they did? Wasn't that a special Korean, Yen Pottinger coronavirus swab? Yeah, those days were fun. Those were fun days.
Here, we'll put that picture.
I know one thing we maybe can talk on the next one, because like you were ill. Okay, and there were a couple of things that had come across that I didn't go back to. One that I had a real quick news story was that they had found Legionnaire's bacillus in the Cuyahoga River. And I was, and this is, trying to go back to find that story, but I thought about you because you had gotten the Legionnaire's disease.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, how did it get in the water in the river? Or
I didn't know it was in the river in Cleveland. So that's an interesting
it was something. I tried to go back and find the story, but it was like this week.
I'll check that one. I will send that one to you.
This week. Okay. Kolomoisky might have thought I was in Cleveland. So
yeah, and the health ranger, that Mike Adams, he had a lady that was in Florida, and because we've been talking about the fog and the possibly delivering disease in this mist. And he was showing these microscopes of this woman had like plants that they were under the overhang and she had plastic on them, and all of this, they were under a microscope of like what was in the rain or whatever, or in the moisture that landed on this paper. And all of these just under the microscope, like this, it's not water vapor. There's stuff in this water.
Well, don't make them think about it. We're glad you're feeling good, George.
That's
glad to see you.
But that's what I'm talking about on Wednesday. Maybe people can, check into this.
They took their best shot and they missed. That's all that matters, right? So we're glad to have you here. We're glad to have you.
Hang on.
It makes you stronger.
What's that?
I got the article. It's Legionnaire's disease.
Oh, geez.
It's in Cleveland.com. It's April 4th. 2025. So this is Kolomoisky. Legionnaire's disease bacteria found in Cuyahoga River, Cuyahoga County Justice Center water. They're going after the people in the Justice Center. They're going after the prisoners.
The plot thickens.
Corey Schaefer is the reporter. And I'll just read the first paragraph. The Cuyahoga County Justice Center's water system was disinfected Friday due to a detection of bacteria that causes Legionnaire's disease. The county said on Friday, Legionnaire's bacteria was found during a regularly scheduled water system test conducted on March 19th, and the presence was found and confirmed on March 31st. Jail 1 and in Tower 1 share a common water system. So yeah, Kolomoisky. I wonder if Kolomoisky owns the Justice Center. 1200 Ontario Street, Cleveland, Ohio. How about that for news, folks?
Isn't that in Cleveland? If there's occupancy in the building, Kolomoisky owns it, and if there's no one in the building, then he doesn't.
Who's to say? But that's fascinating stuff. I mean, who knows? You never know where we'll go on these shows, right? Freewheeling.
Well, on that story,
thank you for everything. Glad
Thanks,
you're feeling
George.
good, and we will see you in a couple days. Thanks everyone in the chat for being here, and please support George at Substack and Buy Me a Coffee. And thanks for watching Neighborhood News. See you next time.
Thanks.